Hey everybody, Andy Kvernen here with another Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional. It's golf season coming up. We're actually in it now, and just today I lined up a golf outing with a couple of friends of mine for June, and I'm looking forward to it. But one of the realities is, for me, golf is a difficult sport. I first figured out that I wasn't very good at golf when I was a kid. I played a lot with my dad and my brother. We maybe played a couple times a week throughout most of my elementary school during the summer, and I thought I was pretty decent until my friends started playing with me in later elementary and early junior high. And the first time that they came out, maybe the second time, all of a sudden they were beating me. They scored better than I did, and it was obvious they had a more natural knack for playing golf. And one of the things that sort of confounded me over the years is people telling me, Andy, you just got to slow down your swing, you got to relax, you got to be natural. And the more people have told me that, the more unnatural I've felt, and perhaps the more difficult I've had swinging that club. It hasn't clicked for me yet. Now, sometimes that can happen in our Christian life. The more people tell us, you gotta go easy, you gotta relax. The more we try to conjure up, well, it can't be that simple, and we try to figure out how can we make this thing, this Christian life work? How can we please God? And that was the propensity of those often in the biblical narrative, especially in the first century, in the time of Jesus. And we get to Matthew chapter 19, and there's three stories there that are put together successively that I think have a lot to do with each other. The first story is the story of some people who come to Jesus and say, Jesus, is it lawful for us to divorce our wives? In fact, specifically they say, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? Matthew 19:3. In other words, they're saying, Jesus, what can we get away with here according to God? What'll God allow us to do? And of course, they're looking for loopholes. They're looking for details. They're looking to figure out how can we manage our relationships, particularly our marriages, in ways that don't disqualify us from the kingdom, but also allow us to do what we want. They're trying to make stuff happen. Now, there's another story, just a couple of stories later, and we'll get to the one in the middle here in a second. But it's the story of the rich young man. And this is a man who comes to Jesus and says, "Good teacher, what must I do to enter the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus responds, you got to sell everything you have and give to the poor. And here's this guy who thinks he's doing everything right. Jesus talks to him about the law. Are you keeping this? Are you keeping that? The guy says, yeah, I think I'm doing everything. And Jesus says, one thing you lack. You got to sell everything and give to the poor. In other words, you got to give up control of that which is most important to you. Now, that's a specific thing that Jesus told this guy because his wealth was obviously an idol for him. He'd made it a bigger priority than anything else, and Jesus knew it. And so he exposes that, and he says, look, you've got to give up control and trust me, trust the Father. Now, right in the middle of that, it's this really beautiful narrative that I think gets at the heart of what God is looking for in our spiritual lives. And often we think, sometimes the easiest thing is the hardest thing. It could never be the right thing. But Jesus says, no, actually, this is the right thing. Though the easiest might be the hardest thing, it's also the right thing. Listen, Matthew 19, verses 13 through 15, it says, Then children were brought to him that he might lay his hands on them and pray. The disciples rebuked the people, but Jesus said, and let's pause there before we listen to what Jesus says. The disciples rebuked the people. Jesus couldn't possibly want anything to do with children. These little kids who bring nothing to the table intellectually, physically, emotionally. They don't add anything to anybody, according to the disciples. How could the good teacher want anything to do with these? But Jesus rebuked the disciples, and this is what he said. Verse 14, he said, Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them. Okay, so Jesus has a heart for kids. We can kind of get that. Jesus seems like a pretty compassionate guy, but then listen to what he says. He says, For to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. Here we have on both sides of this story people who are trying to make their way into the kingdom, who are trying to figure out the rules, trying to manipulate the system so that they can make their lives fit into God's plan. But these kids, they're just showing up. They're just sitting in Jesus' lap. They're just accepting Jesus, accepting them. And there they are, enjoying being in the presence of the good teacher. And so Jesus says, Let the little children come to me, do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. And he laid his hands on them and he went away. Jesus blessed these little kids. And friends, sometimes the easiest thing is the hardest thing because it's the humbling thing. Because to come to Jesus, we think we have to have our ducks in a row. There has to be something that we can do to make us right. But Jesus says, no, I just want you to drop your pretense. I want you to quit pretending like you bring anything to the table. And I want you to come like one of these little ones. Maybe you're there today. You're listening to my voice and you're struggling. You're tired. And you've been trying to figure out the system. You've been trying to make it work. And you just realize you're beating your head against the wall. You can't do it. Take heart in Matthew 19, verses 13 through 15. Come to Jesus as a child, because sometimes the hardest thing is actually the easiest thing. It's the best thing to come like a child to Jesus. And it's when you do, that's when you experience His blessing. God bless you, friends. And Lord willing, we'll see you again soon on the Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional.